AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Rogayeh Tabrizi. Rogayeh is the co-founder and CEO of Theory+Practice. Rogayeh, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, JP, for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure indeed. Let's start with your own background, Rogayeh. Can you take us through your journey, where you first got started in technology? Take us to some of the roles you've held along the way and right up to where you first formed Theory+Practice.
So my journey started in physics. I did my undergrad in physics, and from there I started my master's in string theory, but decided to switch to particle physics shortly after. And I think it was actually a smart decision because CERN was up and running at that point. I ended up going back and forth between Vancouver and Geneva, and I was working on the Atlas detector, which is one of the general purpose detectors for discovering the Higgs particle. From there, I ended up getting interested in economics. It's a long story why, but I'm just going to leave it at that. I decided to do my PhD in economics, which basically managed convincing a bunch of people that I can actually do it without having any background in economics. And so the idea was that I would actually do international development, but then I fell in love with game theory. It was one of the most beautiful things that I had seen up to that point, and really the study of why people do what they do the way they do it. But you have to put in very much mathematical form, and you can't quite hide behind your assumptions. So there is a sense of transparency that it brings to studying of human behavior. Anyways, my PhD was in game theory on networks. So I studied people behavior when they are embedded in social and economic networks, and try to understand and identify what is the impact of social interactions and network on human behavior and outcomes. Anyways, at that point, I started my non-academic career at a company in the Valley, in Silicon Valley. And from there, ended up moving to Hootsuite and worked in roles such as data scientist, chief data scientist, etc. And I think that was the point that it really hit me, the really big gap that exists between academia and practice. A lot of people with technical backgrounds like myself, we would be so excited about having access to all the data in the world, and but very quickly would actually get really disappointed because I kind of joke about this, but really not a joke, that nothing in my education had prepared me to talk to normal people. I really didn't have any way of translating myself to why the ideas that I had, different things that we were working with, was actually important and would impact the bottom line or top line or any line for that matter. So that was a really big gap that I actually realized, and I started working really hard to figure out a way to translate myself better. And that was really truly the birth of Theory and Practice. And the name says it all. It is about connecting the theory and practice.
I love that. That's a great intro, and thank you so much for taking us through the journey up until this point. So, great segue. Who are Theory+Practice? What are you doing? How are you working within data strategy, real-time analytics, and what are you doing to help your clients?
So Theory+Practice is a data science services company. We partner with our clients to create bespoke products for them, which is really sitting at the edge of AI and machine learning. But in addition to AI and machine learning, we really do take advantage of insights from behavioral economics and game theory in order to create a differentiator for our clients. I think the really important piece is really the fact that we focus very much on asking the right question from the very beginning, or at least convincing ourselves that the questions that we are after answering create truly value. Just the focus on ROI. Again, I joke about this sometimes. I'm like, I am not interested in becoming a statistics in all of these studies that we hear that companies invest a lot of money, especially these days in AI, but nothing basically comes out of it. So why is that the case? The way we work truly tries to mitigate that right from the beginning.
Thank you for that, Rogayeh. It's interesting to hear you highlight how much money gets spent on these projects within AI that don't come to fruition. Um, Give us some insight then into how you're helping organizations combat that, from where you start, helping them visualize the order in which things should be done. And can you give us some insight into types of clients that you're helping along the way?
Sure, happy to do that. Actually, I think it was a couple of weeks ago that a study from MIT Sloan came out, and they had interviewed, or they had surveyed, I guess, 3,000 different organizations that have invested in AI, and less than 10% of them actually reported any kind of ROI, or at least measurable, tangible ROI from their investment. And one of the reasons that they had highlighted was majority of the organizations that actually fail, they have not really thought through how humans and algorithms are actually interacting and how the process of decision making really happens. So the way we go about it, and maybe it is actually a place that I can touch on game theory and behavioral economics, we use a whole bunch of different methods to really convince ourselves that we are, again, asking the right question. Behavioral economics, game theory, in a sense, is a way of thinking and a way of backward engineering problems, so that we can actually help, so that we can actually identify these most important problems, right? And in a way, it actually forces us to examine our assumptions. So when you're asking me, how do we work with different clients to help them do what they do better, we really try to examine the assumptions and the status quo that exist. And then from there, we try to combine different methodologies and different disciplines in order to figure out what is the best way of answering these sort of questions.
So, Rogayeh, you've given some insight into your approach. Could you talk us through some real case examples in the types of organizations, whether it be industry or size or types of specialty that you find yourself and your team working on?
Sure. So think about Fortune 10 companies, Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 200 companies. So we do mainly work in enterprise environments. The two verticals that we are focusing on at the moment are mostly retail and finance. To give you an idea about actually a really interesting problem that we worked during COVID last March, one of the questions, especially as retailers moving toward e-commerce, simply just because of the environment and the pandemics that we are dealing with, one of the big questions that's been coming up is return. Can we actually predict who's going to return what item, especially purchasing online, before they even purchased it? So the short answer to that question is yes. You can actually predict who's going to return what item before they actually purchased it. But perhaps even the more important question is, what are you going to do with that information? So, I remember talking with our stakeholders in this company. They are a retailer all over North America, I think north of $6 billion in revenue, and with online and offline stores. So when we were working with them, one of the ideas was that maybe we can give them some discounts. Maybe we can give them 10% discounts at the time of purchase and make that item final sale. If I know that you are going to return that extra pair of shoes, maybe I can make it final sale, right? But then the question is, well, why 10% discount? Why not 5%? Well, maybe they put that extra whatever in the basket in order to hit the free shopping threshold or shipping threshold, right? So maybe we can actually decrease the shipping threshold for them. So the more important piece, again, is the decision making. What are we going to do with the outcomes from the algorithms that we're building, right? And how we are actually using other insights, other ways of making sure that we are actually extracting real value, both for the organization, the company, as well as the customers.
Really useful to hear you describe how you're working on impact-based projects. It's still amazing that these billion-dollar organizations who have dozens of data scientists and engineers still will need outside specialist help to have such an impact. Although you're working with some of the largest organizations, Fortune 100 and so on, your own team in particular is a small small in numbers but very high impact, and you've brought together an amazing collection of PhD people. But one of the things you've been championing is intellectual diversity. Can you talk us through what that means to you, why it's important, and the benefits that it has when building a business?
Sure. I think through my own journey, switching from physics to economics, one of the things that I realized was how much a physicist doesn't understand an economist, and vice versa. In all honesty, it was one of the most humbling journeys for me. One of the things that happened toward the end of my PhD, and when I started actually thinking like an economist, it actually was just was such an aha moment for me, because I started realizing how powerful it is when you have the ability to understand why a physicist thinks the way he does or she does, and the way we actually combine different methods, different ways of solving a problem with a way that an economist thinks, which is a very particular way of asking questions and thinking about the impact of different policies, different implications of decision making, etc. So in a sense, it was a gut feeling for me that this is really important. And we are right now at a day and age that everybody talks about diversity and having a diverse team, which I actually think is very important. And at the same time, if you don't have intellectual diversity, that people from different fields, from different backgrounds, are actually patient enough to really listen to each other and learn from each other, you still are going to miss something. Which, to be honest with you, I think is one of the reasons, perhaps, it's not the reason, I think, but it's one of the reasons that, as you mentioned, all of these really big organizations that we end up working with, there's no shortage of data scientists or no shortage of even people with PhDs. But I usually ask myself, like, why is it that we still can go and be really helpful for these organizations? Believe me, sometimes the puzzle piece for me and my team that, well, they all have PhDs as well. So what can we actually do for them? And the truth is, we do complement those teams. They understand the vertical, the domain that they are working in very well. And we also bring a different way of thinking to the table that they don't necessarily are exposed to, just because of how many different disciplines exist in this small company, at least to begin with. There is another piece also to that intellectual diversity, because we go through this exercise and practice of really listening to each other. A physicist in my company sits with a computer scientist, sits with a mechanical engineer, sits with a biologist, sits with an architect. Right? So the fact that we have gone through this exercise of looking at a problem from so many different angles, trying to translate it into a whole bunch of different ways, we actually managed to communicate the problem and potentially the solution better to our business stakeholders. And that's beyond just working effectively with their technical teams.
Again, great to hear how despite large teams having so many talented people, there's an approach and a methodology that can have a significant ROI, and that's clearly your business model. You mentioned to me earlier that it's a question that you got and you had quite an interesting take on it, is business insights, business intelligence versus business analytics, and how they can often be misinterpreted, and there's distinct differences in value. And this is a lot of what you do working with clients, is to help them understand different ways to view their data. So could you give us some insight to what you mean by that, and why you have the view in which you do on this?
I actually got asked this question by a CEO of one of the companies that we're working with. And they are the second biggest credit card provider, for example, in the US. And one of the things that he was asking me was that, what is actually the difference between business intelligence and business analytics? It was like, I actually love that question. And he said, well, right now, in order to make decisions, what do you guys do? Oh, we have our dashboards and we have our analytics and we have, well, it was okay, well, is it really analytics that you have? Or is it mostly questions that you as a senior exec in your company have, like things that you need to know in order to make better decisions, and then you ask for your team for insights, intelligence, report? And it was like, yeah, it's mostly that. I need to understand the numbers. I need to get some reports in whatever particular area they're interested in. And I was like, okay, so basically what it ends up happening is that it originates from you, goes to the team, and you're asking for some report. Yes, that's right. Well, I was like, well, what about the other way around? What if it is actually possible to look into the data before you actually even have a question and have data truly show you where are some of the areas that you can actually focus on, that you can actually see real ROI? And that to me is the point of analytics, having business analytics. It's this loop, it's a complete loop. It's not just a one directional loop or one directional, I guess, relationship, but it's that data informs a strategy, strategy informs, how you want to go to data and kind of questions that you want to answer. So having the ability to be native to data is really having, I guess it is about having these sort of loops, complete loops in the organization.
Again, yeah, it makes sense, and it just shows that at the highest level, CEOs of multi-billion-dollar companies are still struggling to define how they want to use the data to answer business problems. And theory and practice, a very specialized firm, are able to step in and help guide them on that path. I want to get your take now on what's in store. You're working in such a high impact space, advising some of the who's who of major industries within enterprise. What do you enjoy most about what you do, and what can we expect to see from theory and practice over the next 12-24 months?
Oh, that's a good question. It just brought a smile to my face. The piece that I enjoy the most is when I see the aha moments. When there's this real sense of you're sitting on gold. There's so much from your data that you can understand, explore. But most organizations really, even when there is expertise in the house, they are not. They're just experiencing or exploiting the tip of the iceberg, right? So when we work with our clients and there's this possibility of actually going deeper, exploring things, creating real value without necessarily having to wait 3 years for your data to be clean, right? Sometimes I talk with our stakeholders about, especially when they ask me, do we have enough data? Are we going to be able to answer these questions? The answer is that most probably you have a lot of data and you have enough data, but what is the minimum viable data to answer the right question? That really is the question, right? So those are moments that I really get a lot of personal satisfaction of working with executives, but also building these sort of scalable solutions for them. In terms of what is next for us, our team is growing really fast, and I'm really excited about the accelerated pace, especially due to COVID. One of perhaps positive consequences of our world's turning a little bit more digital faster than we anticipated. So there is a lot of opportunity to truly enhance people's well-being and livelihood. We all talk about the negatives and the challenges that we all are experiencing, but there is real positive in what we are going through as well, because we have to think outside our box. Solutions that were working yesterday are not going to work tomorrow. So, okay, what do you do then? Massive companies, they have to rethink about the way they're using technology, they're serving their customers, they're getting ahead of different problems, and even how they're managing risk and crises, right? So to me, there is a lot of opportunity, and our team is growing very fast. We have been building a lot of solutions for specifically in these verticals that we are talking about. But the thing that again excites me is that we get to partner with our clients to really sit at the forefront of reimagining future and how services are being actually available to their customers.
Thank you. Final question then on that. You talked about the exciting growth. You've given us some insight into the team and the types of people you look for. I just want to add to that. Help us visualize the type of people who are working at Theory and Practice. What are the backgrounds, and what, most importantly, what do you look for when you look to grow the team?
I look for courageous people, in all honesty. It's not as much as it is about technical background and really knowing the math behind the algorithms that we are building, and it's definitely not just about coding and not just about having the some of the other skills, I guess software skills in a sense. The thing that I look for is people who are really courageous thinkers and they are not afraid of thinking outside the box. They are humble, they listen carefully, they are going to work hard. These are all the things that, if you look at the essence of who we are and the culture within the organization, it is very much about working hard, asking difficult questions, thinking outside the box, dreaming big. These are things that we really strive. And we are curious. We are really, really curious. We keep asking questions. I think in terms of how the team is made, or what the team is made of, as I mentioned again, we have a mix of economists, physicists, computer scientists. I think that's really the essence of the team. But we also have engineers and architects that are very familiar with big data solutions.
It sounds like an incredibly exciting place to work for people who are passionate about solving business problems. You guys are obviously having a lot of success, and Rogayeh, we appreciate you coming on to talk to us about that journey, and we look forward to everything else you can accomplish.
Thank you so much, JP. I really appreciate it.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.